this is our first episode, right? And so I'm changing around my tech and my camera's all wobbly, of course. I'm not sure if I'm using the right microphone for recording.
It looks good.
I have multiple stuff going on. And someone even suggested, like, oh, set up your phone. And you know what? I just didn't have time to do that this morning. And no problem, right?
Yeah, there is something at a time. You can't do everything all at once. You can't climb that hill all at once. It's like pieces, right? And what works for one doesn't always work for everybody else. So, you know what? You try it, it works, it doesn't. Sometimes it's just that, you don't have time, so you don't do it. Like it doesn't fit, even though it fit, it just doesn't fit into your timeline.
Exactly, right? And your timeline isn't always like, ooh, I hit my schedule, this and that. Like I woke up tired.
Yeah.
Life is life. Anyway, I think this is the perfect way to be approaching episode 1 of Confessions from the Messy Middle. So yay.
Absolutely. I mean, it's never. Whoever thinks perfect and balance exists, I think, is somebody who's disappointed on most days.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah. I like the way if you say what you just said really fast, it sounds like perfect imbalance. I kind of just want to lean into that.
Yeah. Right? It is. I can't remember the word somebody used once, and it made so much sense. And it's like, where am I giving my focus right now or today? And that means the other things aren't. So
yeah,
the laundry is not done. Like, honestly, if somebody comes to my house, like I am somebody who likes things in their place.
Okay.
And it took me a while to be okay with, you know what, if I didn't get things cleaned up, if my house isn't like people coming over ready, that's okay, because then they're not my people as well, to actually see my flaws. And it's like, I don't have to have everything in its place all the time. I don't have to. And that was a whole learning curve in itself. But I need things in their place a little bit because then I feel cluttered.
Yeah.
But not all the time.
Yeah.
There's a cost to it. There's a cost to having it all the time. And then everything you say yes to, you're always saying no to something else.
Totally. And it's hard to come to, to grips with that reality sometimes.
Yeah. But that's where too, I think my husband and I, because we used to always offer to help people, always going to do things. And then we realized there's a cost too, the cost to ourselves, time together, their kids doing this and that. And so now we stop and we ask each other, okay, I'm thinking of saying yes to this. What do you think? Just have that pause to be like, well, if you say yes, it means this, this, and this. If you say no, this, this, and this, and you weigh where that scale to be, what are my priorities,
Yeah. My partner and I of 10 years have had the ongoing conversation of like, what is our clutter level? Just to go back to that. And it's interesting because we'll have different levels at different times. And then it's like, okay, I'll clean with you. Or he'll be like, okay, yeah, I'll take care of that.
My thing, my husband brings something in, I'm like, what's going out? Or where is that going? If you don't know where that and it's just coming in because it's coming in, like, do we need all that stuff? He's got like his closet that whatever can be his bedside table, whatever. And there is a section of the basement, which is all his stuff. And his that he does. And then the rest where it's our communal stuff is like not as cluttered.
Nice. My big thing is grocery shopping. Like if something's on sale, I'm going to buy multiples of. And yeah, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, but it's pasta, right? We need that. But now that my mom lives in Colorado, not too far from me, she used to live in Los Angeles. I see her doing the same thing, and it's like, oh, that's where I got it from.
Yeah, and my husband as well. Costco will come home, and I'm like, do we need a year's worth of crackers? Do we need these? Like, this takes up this much space for Costco size box of crackers. And when you're buying 12 to 15 boxes, probably think he owns a store at times. So,
It feels really good to own a store sometimes.
yes.
That's a whole other episode.
It's just fascinating. He'll come home. I'm like, do we need that much ahead? Like, seriously, if there's ever a power outage, just come to our house. But like, we're stocked up for a while, till at least the power would go back on, I'm sure. So, but it is fascinating. So we come to, okay, he'll return some of it. So he's got
Oh,
a
wow.
comfort zone, but we don't need, oodles of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Nice. So just getting started, would you like to introduce yourself, or should we just hop in? What would you like to do?
Your podcast.
My podcast.
What do you envision when you ask that? What did you envision when you said that to me?
Ooh, that's interesting. So to get intimate, I don't know how to properly introduce you, so I was hoping you'd take me off the hook.
All right, then let's go. Sounds perfect.
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay.
So, hey everyone, welcome to our first episode of Confessions from the Messy Middle. I am here with Andi Clark, and she is a fellow IFSer, IFS, Internal Family Systems, and an impressive, Andi, 30-year background in health and wellness coaching. Is that fair to say? Why don't you give me a more rounded, just 30-second background on yourself?
Ooh, 30 seconds. So
I know, right?
So yes, I do have 30 years in the health and wellness space. Background, actually, which I don't think I ever did tell you, was started off as a massage therapist. And
Oh,
yeah, I was a massage therapist. And then through that, learning more about the body and how the body moves, got into personal training, sports rehab, working with CEOs, high-level CEOs, and some athletes, and that getting into some, post-injury stuff with them, post-rehab, and getting into performance stuff. And then throughout that time, it was fascinating just how everything ebbs and flows. I was burnt out during that time. And I felt
yes.
I'm training these people, pushing these people. They're going hard on workouts and I couldn't. And so much of that. And I kept trying to figure out how to get out of that journey, how to get out of all of that. And it was very frustrating, very lonely, going to doctors and specialists, and doctors not believing that I was even feeling what I was feeling because I looked fit. And yeah, so it was interesting. Then my son was born in burnout, my second son. And I did not have the reserves in my stress system to have him. Sorry, this is more than 30 seconds.
No, actually, I was gonna say, like, bring it on. This is fascinating. I'm wanting to go on that tangent and that tangent.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this is great.
You can dive all over the place. So I didn't have the stress reserves to support my son's stress system in vitro. And he was born with all kinds of stress signs. And going to doctors and specialists, and the same thing. Nope, this is normal. Nope, that's normal. Same thing that happened to me. And I was like, this is not.
Oh
And
my gosh.
eventually started understanding and learning more about the holistic world and how they're in the preventative space, and our medical world is in the reactive space, which is needed, right? When somebody has cancer, we need to treat it. When somebody falls and breaks, needs surgery, or has a major injury, we need to help them. Like there's a time for both. And if both worked, a powerhouse. But unfortunately, they're so separate from one another. And so I found that holistic world, and I found parts. I'm like, oh, this helps with a part of what we're feeling. This helps with another part. Started realizing there's all these parts to it, and became a sleep, stress, and resilience coach once him and I got out of burnout, got our nervous systems back on track, our guts back on track, our hormones back on track, and our nervous system all regulated, and did all of these things, and started working with first responders in 2018.
Right. We talked about that yesterday. Wow. How could I forget that important part? Sorry. Yeah.
I became a sleep, stress, and resilience coach to first responders. But through all of this time, through all of these 30 years, like I have all these tools, all these skills, all these different pieces of this puzzle. I would bring in experts for the hormones and experts that can do all these or above my scope of practice. And I would bring all of these pieces of the puzzle into my program. And I'd have some that would go through 100% of it. But there were others that, would wanted to, but there was
Mhm.
that just kept stopping them. And I'm like,
Mhm.
there's this piece that's missing. And that's where I started actually going to therapy and stuff because I was trying to understand my clients' traumas, my clients' PTSD. I knew how EMDR worked for them, and I ended up working with an EMDR specialist that did parts. And I started
Nice.
parts through her, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this has been the most amazing transformational journey for me. That things I was stuck in, I was starting to make breakthroughs in. That I started studying IFS through that, and now working with my clients, it's been fascinating because when I worked in a gym, the ones that got through the door and came into the gym, they, pushed through and did their thing. But there's
Mhm.
many that have the want to change something in their life to make it healthier. And they have that want, but there's the struggle, like to go to bed a little bit earlier, to give themselves a little bit of a break, or to slow themselves down if they can't, or to actually do a little more if their body is stuck in a non-moving motion, or change some of just certain things in their lifestyle, and they keep getting stuck and feeling like they're a failure. They see all these people and all these programs and coaching that they go to. I've had clients go through my programs where I'm like, I don't know how to help this person. I see the want, see the will, and there's something stopping them. And IFS was that thing for me. Is I'm like, we're all protectors. So having that last piece in the puzzle recently has been
Yeah.
game changer for then being able to help bring down these protectors, to get my clients then can start implementing all the tools and skills that I have acquired over the last 30 years too, to put all of that together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So instead of going directly into this messy middle that your life is in right now, would it be okay if we went back to when your second son was born and when you were in burnout, and sort of retroactively apply some of the parts that you notice or remember at that time?
Yeah.
Some of
So,
your parts.
well, things that I realize now as well is like there were certain things that were putting me into burnout.
Mhm.
Was I constantly had protectors protecting me. Um, and so what I'm finding is when you have a protector that is constantly protecting you, quite often what happens as well is your stress system gets taxed.
Okay.
So when you have these protectors kicking in, your stress system gets so taxed that your cortisol is constantly running, and it's just constantly pushing you into burnout as well. Um, so there's other things too. So while my son was little, it's funny, I've actually never thought about this from an IFS perspective. So this
Oh,
is,
exciting.
yeah. So when my son was little, I grew up thinking that there was one way to do things, that this is the way, this is how it had to be.
Mhm.
And so in parenting, even when you have two kids, they need to be parented so different. They all have different different ways of the way, like they're a combination of like both my husband and I, but a very different combination of each in the way that they react and do things in their life. And so I thought though that there was just one way of parenting. You just needed to do this, and that was that. And I judged every other parent constantly. I'd be like, well, they're not doing this with their child. Or like, so nutrition is a big thing for me. Oh my God, they're feeding their child this. Oh my
Mhm.
God, taking their child should be in bed. Why are they up doing things? Or, oh my gosh, like the judge. It was
Yeah.
horrible. And I've realized that that was definitely like a protector, that judging that came out was something that I had learned at a young age, was to do that. That's how I grew up. That's how I was raised.
Was it sort of like something that you would tell yourself and that would motivate doing certain things? Like you mentioned different food, or let's just go going to sleep, right? It's like, oh my gosh, that parent isn't, getting their child to bed on time. Well, no wonder that is happening to you, right?
Yeah.
Did you internalize that and say, like, okay, my child is having this challenge. Ugh, what is wrong with you? You let him go to bed half an hour late. No wonder you're experiencing that. How dare you get yourself together, sort of thing. Was it like that?
Similar, yes.
Okay.
Like, absolutely. I would sit and have conversations with my husband and be like, how do their kids function the next day? How are they doing this? And it's just been so fascinating because I lived such a structured life growing up as a child. And
Mhm.
I need more structure. That's my personality. I I do like to and my second child, the one that was born in burnout, does not like change. Needs to know what's happening tomorrow, what are we doing, all of this stuff. That I think too that it was easier to judge these people because I could not do that with
Mm.
my child really needs to be structured. Like he needed to. Anytime we were out of structure with him, if his nap or his bedtime was not at the right time, like he became a disaster, which I've learned is neurodiverse. All of these things with him, my child is hypersensitive to his environment. He gets
Mhm.
overwhelmed and overstimulated so much easier than most kids. Well, then similarly to other neurodiverse kids, but not to an atypical child. And so the neighbors that were going out all the time and being able to get their kids to all these programs and to be able to go out to things, I didn't have the energy for. I
Mhm.
and I knew that my child would be a mess. So it's a lot easier to sit there and judge others than to actually sit there and go, oh, my life is just different. And to be okay in that and to be okay with the fact that like it's lonely. I hear this from other parents with neurodiverse kids because their kids don't have they're so brilliant in so many ways, but some of the things that other kids can do so simply and easily, our kids can't. And
Mhm.
and it can be lonely because people are like, well, why doesn't your kid just go play soccer? Why doesn't your kid just go do this? And I'm like, it's not that easy. The meltdown,
Yeah.
overwhelm, all of these things. So I was managing so much in the house with the overwhelm and the feelings that he was having that it was so much easier to just judge somebody else. So much easier.
Gotcha. Yeah, because inside, I think people mostly or find it really easy to like click over into shame, and I certainly know that I do. Right, I'm trying to come up with. I'm child free, so I'm coming up with an example of when I was a child because I'm a late diagnosed neurodivergent, and one of the things that all of the kids were doing was going to camp, right, and like freeing up parents during the summer to be somewhat like school time, and there was absolutely no way that I felt safe at a camp, like whether it was an overnight camp or just a day camp, like seeing the same people over and over again, and not having those set friends. No, it wasn't going to happen, right? And so even as I was coming up with that example, and I know that I'm comfortable with it, I'm like, oh yeah, is something's wrong with me, right? And I recognize that as shame. So full circle, I'm bringing that back to your story and how parents of neurodivergent children can sometimes feel or can often feel lonely, right? Because there's all this advice like, oh, well, do this, do that. Don't have the energy, and it's not going to work for the child. You know that, right? So just like it's just that lack of mirroring for other parents. Can you help me kind of wrap my head around parenting?
Yeah, well, I think what I've discovered is that we all have like you take two people together and you raise and they have a child, their parenting styles are so different.
Yeah.
And in a household, they have to adapt and learn how to work within those two different parenting styles. That when we go outside and step out to all of our neighbors and all of our friends, there's different cultural ways that they were raised. There's different structural ways that they were raised, different dynamics in the way that they were parented and raised and taught, and different beliefs, and so much that goes into just, regardless of how the child is, just how the people parent. So there's that. And then
Mhm.
you go in a child that doesn't fit into the mold of society.
Okay. Mhm.
A child that doesn't fit into the mold of society, most of us, that's not a fair statement, because I actually don't know, because I haven't talked to many people. How I felt was, I believe like everybody is usually more thinking about themselves than they are about what other people are doing. So we're sitting here thinking that other people are judging us or doing things when sometimes they're just in the middle of their own muck doing their own thing. But there is that thing when your kid isn't joining the other neighbors to play, or when your kid is sitting and reading a science book on the steps instead of playing and totally happy just being out there with the other kids while they're running around normally playing, and they're reading the science book. It's just, it's fascinating that I think as a parent, we have to get so comfortable with who we are
Mm. Mhm.
in order to be then comfortable with who our children are, especially when they don't fit in a mold.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that mold is kind of what success looks like,
Yeah.
right? Or is supposed to look like. And therefore, if you don't fit in, your child doesn't fit in, then somehow there's a failure or a flaw. Yeah, absolutely.
Different. Like I had to pull my one child out of school, this same child
Mhm.
out of school,
Mhm.
because he could not, the anxiety, the depression, just getting there, the sounds, the noises, the overstimulation, and also the boredom. And then,
Yes.
right? It was just all these things that he just, and I realized once he was home, like, how cool this kid is, and how amazingly his superpowers of visually processing everything that he sees in a day is just unbelievable, but overwhelming. And through the eyes of his age is so different, that starting to see these things as gifts and seeing these things as, wow, what he can do with this. And as I've dove through the life of homeschooling, I'm learning, like, I've never been in a box. I've hated being in a box. So I've struggled with our school system as well, that it teaches just to one style of a learner and one way of
Yep.
teaching. And there's so many teachers who want to move out of different things. They see, oh, this, like, they want to do different things, but because the school system is so structured, the teachers aren't always able to do what they would like as well. And so having him homeschool, I have been, like, we are different on our street because we homeschool. Um, but I'm cool with it. I'm actually so proud of them for that, and for how amazing of kids they are. And one of my kids will most likely go into a science lab, into like university and all that stuff. And I don't even know if the other one will ever do any formal education whatsoever.
Mhm.
He will pave his own path and make his own way in this world, and I think be so successful because of it. And I've had to learn that I don't need to explain that to everybody, that I don't need to
Nice.
explain how different my kids are, that I don't need to. They might ask a question about, like, are they really doing such and such? I'll be like, yep. Like if they're doing high school math when they're in grade 6, 7 or whatever, right? If they're just doing different things or they're doing something differently, I'm like, yep. And that's it. I don't need to explain.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you, for anyone that's listening and new to IFS, can you explain how just coming from that place
Mm.
is self energy? Because that's what I'm hearing as you explain it.
Yeah. So self is when you can help me with all the C's.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry about it. Just name whatever comes to mind.
Yeah. There's like curious, well, hard CK, kind, caring, curious is a big one for me too. If I'm not wanting to be curious, if I'm wanting to judge or talk over somebody to just to get my point across or do something, then I'm like, ooh, I'm not in self. Self is when you are not judging and letting the environment around you just be what they need to be and how they need to be and how it is. Does that mean that we don't stand up for ourselves in certain situations? Absolutely not. But we can do it in a kind, caring, compassionate way.
Mm-hmm.
And be firm with what we do, how we do expect to be treated, or how something did hurt us, or how we felt about something. But it's done in such a different way than when a protector is kicking in. And I think it was in the IFS group that we're in. I was asking a question about my son, about how to actually get him into IFS because he's resistant. Huge, and he has major perfectionism. He won't be coached by somebody. He doesn't want anybody to help him, and it's all protectors. I know it's all protectors. And somebody said to me in that group that as a parent, it's really hard because as a parent, we have agendas. An agenda is not self. And it's like, so you need to try to find a way to be in self. And I sat with that for weeks going, okay, this makes sense. I have no idea how to implement this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the agenda with my son is to help him with his protectors, to help him so that he doesn't have this huge perfectionism, so he can actually go and enjoy doing things without so much pressure on himself, that he can just start loving himself for who he is. And that's an agenda I have for my child. And then there was one day where we both he came and sat on my lap. He's 10 years old. And he had his back to my chest. And I had my arms around him and we just talked. And I was like, so Pokemon tournaments. He was very good. Very, very good. Highly ranked. But he was in juniors. He was expecting he should be able to beat masters. These are people that are have been playing for 30 years.
Older than he's
that compete all over the world, that do all of this stuff, that if he even got close, in the game where he actually got so close to where it could have been his game, but he didn't win, pressure on himself. So the fun was coming out of it. So we just had to talk about in self. It wasn't me having an agenda. It was just kind of what would help you bring the joy back in Pokemon? And it was stopping the big tournaments and just going back to Thursday nights at our local Pokemon store with his friends and PA days and March breaks and all of those things, just getting his friends together to play. I'm like, sure, let's do it. And it's fascinating because as soon as we did that, other things started changing in our house too. He started calming down. He started being more in self because protecting himself as much to prepare for the tournaments that at the start he really did love doing. But the more that his protector was kicking in, the more it was there. And the odd time I will say something to him no pressure, just know that you can work on these protectors if you ever do choose.
How does that look for him?
He's like, I know. He'll roll his eyes sometimes, depends on the day. Sometimes he'll get mad at me, sometimes he won't. And that's where I'm like, I don't even know if that's actually me being in self or having an agenda.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And that's where too, based on his reaction. If I'm in self, usually his reaction is calm, but I'm like, that's still an agenda. Still an agenda.
So what parts do you think that agenda comes from? Right?
Being a parent and wanting the best for your kids. I don't want him to hurt. I do not want my child to hurt so much. And I don't want him he excludes himself from so much in life because of his perfectionism. Instead of enjoying moments, enjoying things, he puts himself down for getting something wrong or something not quite right, even though it was he's still ahead of the game. He's grades ahead level in subjects.
Yeah.
That there's things that he should not know. There's things that he should not be doing, and he will punish himself for not knowing them. And this perfectionism is it really halts him from being his best self. And as a parent, I see that. So my agenda is, I would love to help him just be his best self.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah. It's like, as a parent, you see another dimension that he's not experiencing at the moment.
that
And go
sorry,
ahead.
he's at a different stage.
Yeah. 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 And I was thinking like the dimension is almost like a child will see like this is good and this is not good enough, right? Like that's not even go to bad. But you're seeing time,
Mm.
that time dimension, like, oh, here's this, and there's such a dynamicness to every human being, to our entire world, that will be a snowball in that direction, right? And this pressure, this perfection will be a snowball in more of a stuck direction.
Yes.
And you can see that. And it's almost like I can feel your heart swelling with that sort of self energy and love and wanting to give that to him. But yeah, how do you balance that when maybe he doesn't understand the dimension yet, right?
So you're saying that. So the most fascinating thing I find about IFS is that when we go in and talk to a protector, the view that that protector has, the situation that happened, and the view that that protector has on that situation is so through the eyes of a child. It is through the eyes of a child who has a different emotional and intellectual intelligence in what they're saying and doing and how they're experiencing that whole thing. So, examples of this, what examples can I give? So, I was working with a client and they had a, or actually, I'm going to give an example of even myself. I'm neurodiverse as well. Subjects have always come easy for me. I remember in grade 5, I remember sitting in the classroom and we were spelling a word. I couldn't spell a word. I was way ahead in vocabulary, reading, writing, all of that stuff. I could not get this one letter. It had a silent letter in it. And I kept going up to the teacher's desk and she says, no, go back to your desk and do it again. I remember tears falling on my paper. I couldn't get it. I remember kids looking at me like the one beside me, I remember wanted to help me, but knew that they'd get in trouble by the teacher. And I just remember sitting there in that moment thinking, I am so stupid. I am not smart. And the thing is had I stopped and went, oh, but you're in these math competitions and you're in, and you're being sent to another classroom for this subject and you're being this, I didn't. That child in me perceived that whole thing at that moment of, I am not smart. And I
Yeah.
carried that with me forever
Yeah.
until I started dealing with that part in IFS. Like we start going through parts and we start going through the ones I've like worked through. Some of these things were just things the teacher said to me, one little comment. And my whole perception from the child view that I had with the emotional and intellectual maturity that I had at that point in time, interpreted so different than the self of me now, who has so much more life experience, who's done so much more work on myself, that when we do all of this work on ourselves as well, and we see the things in our kids or our neighbors or our friends or people that aren't paying us to work with us, and we're like, oh, these are your protectors, or these are things that are happening with you. I could so help you if you wanted it. And I kind of want to have this agenda with them, and I'm learning to not. And that's been a whole lesson for me. First responders, oh my gosh, like how much I put out at the start to help them and to realize that they had so many walls and blocks and protectors up too, just to get through their day to day. That it's one of these things where it's like the agenda versus self. And then when it's your child,
Mhm.
you're like, well, I can unsolicited teach them and guide them, can't I? Right? And
I feel it, right?
that's an agenda. So
Yeah. Yeah. it is really hard to figure out like what is that agenda, right? Because even in like textbook Dick Schwartz IFS, um, self has somewhat of an agenda towards healing, right? So exactly what we're talking about, like, is this a self-led agenda of healing, or is it like me saying to a neighbor or something like, oh, I can so help you, right? Like, and then I haven't worked that out yet, so I'll just throw that big question out to the audience. But for me, and I think for a lot of my clients as well, so I'm curious what your experience is around this one. I have a lot of protectors come up that are really afraid of non-action, right? Like of being okay. So in this situation, it would be like, yeah, but I can help. What if I don't? Right. And then am I being selfish? Am I being awful? Am I being lazy? Am I taking something away by not even offering it? Am I being a really bad business person because apparently that's not marketing in, this example that's running through my head right now? Like, if I don't put on my website, hey, I can help. Am I in self, not in self? Is that agenda? You know what I mean? Like this overthinker neurodivergent person comes out then and it's like, I have to figure this out.
That's a couple of different parts.
Right? That's just like spiraling and
And
bouncing a little ping pong.
yeah, and I've worked through that too in my business, and trying to figure out the salesiness versus authenticity of where you are at. And that's where I believe as well is it's okay to offer and it's okay for them to not accept.
Totally. Yeah.
When you push, like if they're going to your website and you say, I can help, they're there. If they don't want the help, they will click off your website, and that's okay. If they want the help, they will. So it's that balance too between how much do we keep pushing them? Like we can offer it and see where they go, how they react. It sometimes is how you offer it as well, but it's working with these protectors because as I just said, when we start diving into the protector, like we can right now guess why this protector is happening, why all these scenarios. I don't think I've ever been right once.
Nice.
Right? I have a client who, very dominating, controlling father, very, very, very much. She had an eating disorder. We're like, oh, I wonder if that was the one thing that you could control. It had, when we talked to the protector, nothing to do with the father, nothing. It has been fascinating as her and I have been going through this IFS journey together that I think once her father came up with a protector and it was a mild issue this protector had, it was actually with like a whole of a group of people. Like it wasn't just her father. That it has been surprising for her to see that her dad actually wasn't the one that created as many of these protectors as like when we first dove into this, we're like, oh, your dad's going to be written all over this. He wasn't. Like, wow. So fascinating. And through this whole journey, she has been able to see her dad through an entirely different light from a protector's view of, oh, wow, the ways and he does these things. There's so many protectors and his actually struggles and insecurities and different things that she doesn't see him as this big, strong person, like domineering, controlling person anymore, more as somebody who is really struggling and crying for help in a sense. And it's just fascinating, but it wasn't through like we can guess, we can sit here and guess what all those protectors that you were like, there's a couple of different protectors you said for, offering help. When do I, the sales, like these are all different ones. And if we dive into them, I bet you, if we wrote on a list in a list on paper, any ideas that we can come up with, we probably won't be right on any of them. Your protector will probably have a very different, because who we are now in ourself as our age of who we are now is so many different experiences than they were, that how they interpret anything in every situation, it might be a situation we don't even remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pops
Yeah.
up, like, fascinating.
Yeah.
There's a deep trauma.
Yeah. And I think you cut out a little bit. I think I heard you say deep trauma. And there's this part that like shot up in me and I'm like, I need to share that deep trauma is not necessarily one giant event.
Hmm.
It can be just like the drip drop of a little faucet that wears down, you know, the sink. And that's a lot of what my more deeply rooted trauma is. So I'm like, hey, no, see me.
Like, and the fascinating thing that I found in working with first responders is, yes, they have these traumas on calls. There are
Yeah.
things that have happened, hands down, those are your big T traumas. But once you start working with them, you realize it's a lot of stuff that happened, all those little things that happened, something that a teacher said, or something that even a sergeant had said to them, or something that, happened in recruit school, or something that earlier on in their life happened, of all these little things that happened that have had more of an effect. Like we had,
Mm.
I do recall even working with one client that he discovered that all of his symptoms that he was having was actually because of the passing of his dog.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It wasn't all the traumas that he'd seen at work. It wasn't everything he'd experienced at work. The dog was the comfort he had always come home to, and the comfort was not there anymore to help protect him from all this other stuff. And it was the loss of that best friend, protector, and that, so these
Yeah.
other was reared up inside him.
Yeah. Wow. So this like this home base, this equalizing experience that he had is just completely out of equilibrium and everything else sort of comes in
Yeah.
at a whole different strength. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's fascinating that when we start looking, like, as a neurodiverse, like I'm saying perfection with my child, and what I've been learning is, with a lot of kids that catch on to things so quickly at the start, it
Yeah.
might be something all of a sudden that they don't know how to do, and they've not been able to, because it's never happened to them before. They don't have the skills or the tools to deal with it. And so that wherever they are in that emotional and mental maturity wise, intellectually maturity, like stage, quite often like 4 years, 5 years, 6 years old, wherever something happens,
Yeah.
and they all of a sudden don't know how to do something, they're like, that trauma kicks in and that memory kicks in of that in an IFS session. And you're like, wow, that was the memory. That was what kicked in that perfectionism.
Mm. Yeah.
Right.
One little thing. Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
I would have expected.
Yeah. I really relate to a lot of the things that you're describing, especially about your son. Um, I was really good at like just about everything I did as a kid, right? So then it became my identity, right? And on top of that, there was this like, you know, good performance thing, but like my whole life I spent um putting that pressure on me, getting to some success that wasn't even defined, right? But after doing more and more IFS work, I see that it just became my identity. It be part of it was that being good at stuff was the security that I had as a child. But it was just, no, this is who I am. And if I said I wasn't good at something when I first did it, who am I? Right? That's terrifying to like whatever age you are, right? Um, and I don't know, 20 years ago or so, I got really into Carol Dweck and I was like, oh, I grew up with a fixed mindset and not a growth mindset, and tried to dive into that. But that's like the first layer, you know? So it's almost like regular therapy or CBT or, you know, positive thinking is the first layer that we can start to recognize who we are. But man, I think for almost all people, like you have to get down to these kernels of, oh, that was my identity to really be able to heal and set free. And I recognize that whatever I'm saying right now, I'm all over the place. So I'm hoping people can follow along. But it makes sense to me. So there.
Yeah, no, absolutely what you're saying. Like it just,
Okay, good.
so with my son too, he went to CBT therapy, right?
Mhm.
Phenomenal therapist, got along with her well, helped with some of his anger, some of his feelings, because before he couldn't even register feelings.
Yep.
He couldn't say if
Yep.
he was happy
Yeah.
or sad. He couldn't say. And now he like can blurt out, I'm really sad right now. And we're like, as he's
And he's 10. That's so great. That's amazing.
so CBT has been amazing. I am not going to discredit it at all, but she was so stuck on this perfectionism, on the coaching, and on that. And as more I kept learning about parts in IFS, I'm like, it's a part. That is
Yeah.
a protection in him. And no matter what she does, she is not going to be able to break that until he has worked with the protector. And that's
Yeah.
where I find there's so many pieces to this puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Like, same thing. You can go and work with all of your protectors that are going to decrease the amount that your cortisol is kicking in and you're getting into a stress or anxiety state. But if you don't have tools to help you with just things in your everyday life, you're going to have more protectors kicking in. Or you're not going to be, if you don't have the tools of really understanding how do I get a better, deeper quality sleep so that my body can heal from all that's happened now that the protectors aren't rearing their head anymore, or like there's just so many different pieces of this puzzle and tools. And quite often when we're working on these pieces, working on this puzzle, and we keep hitting like kind of roadblocks, we're like, people like, this one should be working, why isn't this working for me? Quite often what I find is once we break through those blocks of the IFS, once we start really working to get those protectors, get them new jobs, to start helping in a productive way, then all of these other tools that you have learned through the years start kicking in as well. So the most fascinating thing is like when the protector happens, it's stuck, that neural pathway is stuck in that time frame. So if it's 10, if it happened when you're 15, it happened when you're 25, that's where you're stuck, that it doesn't know any tools you've learned since then.
Okay, yeah. So you're saying like as you're blending with that part that is like it's kicked in, seeing the pattern and going, okay, I have to do this. This is the way forward. This is my job.
Mhm.
Then anything that other parts learned through your lifetime, just so you don't have access to when
Right.
you're okay.
So great example of this is working with a client with anorexia.
Mhm.
So it was when she was 16, was when she was hospitalized with anorexia. And that's where that memory, neural pathway, everything was set. That's when a couple of different protectors kicked in with that. And it's fascinating because through the years, she has studied all these things all about her autoimmune system, because that stemmed into an autoimmune disease. She had stemmed into like her eating and nutrition and stress management techniques and tools. Like she is so well versed in all of these things. And it was fascinating because once we talked to this protector and found out, they did not know, once they found out her age and where she's at, they didn't know anything she'd learned.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it was fascinating because I was sitting there teaching this 16-year-old. I had to actually step in and do a little bit of chatting with them because they wouldn't listen to her. The
Mhm.
they wouldn't listen to them, even though everything I was saying, this client
It's the
knew.
same. Yep. Yep. Yep.
This client knew all about healthy eating 3 meals, eating enough food in her day to get it. This until I started feeding it, it was like, okay, well, maybe this is okay. Like it was giving us some attitude and stuff. But it was
Mhm.
fascinating. I'm teaching it some of these tools that this individual had been trying to implement for years. And her knowledge on all of these things was crazy, that once we got through to this protector, it's starting to listen.
Yeah.
We did learn as well, though, is that through working with that when they go into a part in her, or if they go into a room, if they want to just go into a room, we have to make sure that we have a window in the room that is slightly open so they can see and hear everything that's going on in her life. Because if not, when she'd go back and check in, they didn't know what had just happened in the last week. Or all the things, or if she's looking at all the books and knowledge and stuff that she's learned, they're not seeing it. So we had to
Yeah.
open the doorway or that pathway so that part can actually see it and catch up on everything.
Yeah.
And so it's so fascinating that they just get stuck in that, and anything we've learned since then. So all of those tools that we may think we've failed at or haven't worked for us, once we start working with that protector, we start noticing that, hey, let me try that one again. Let me try this tool. Let me try this thing. And this that didn't work before, and see how it works now. And we're like, oh my gosh, I can start implementing this. Oh, I can start doing this, when those protectors start having this other job and start working with you instead of pulling you apart from it.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like our society is so polarized, right? That if someone from your polar opposite group says a good idea, it's like there's this distrust, and even if you hear it, it's like pushing it away, right? But when it comes from someone that there is more trust, there is more openness to hear it, it's then considered, right? Oh, okay, yeah, okay, I'll take that in. I can see where you're coming from, and all of that. Yeah, but as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, you got not only a lot of permission from all of those protectors that were making sure that other part didn't hear it. Like, okay, go play video games, right? Like, we're gonna deal with this, so you don't have to. There's that permission to get through, but then there's really that choice, right? Like, okay, look through the window in this waiting room. Like, did you hear that? Do you want to take that in? It's beautiful. Yeah, there's a lot of agency that you're giving to your clients and each of your clients' parts as you're going through that.
Yeah. And it has to go to paces for them. Can't be on our agenda in a timeline that we want it. And it's been fascinating that what I noticed too is, like, when a client is like, oh, this one's a hard one to get into today, or this one's a hard one to talk to. And we just let them have a window to kind of just observe us for the next time until our next session. It is fascinating how that protector sometimes has really come around before our next session and is so open to talk. Like a protector that had their back turned and wouldn't even like almost even tilt their head to the side to even like glance at us. So sitting and facing us and ready for a conversation the next session, when we leave that window open with them to have the option to hear and see everything in our life as it is now, as you are now when you are in self now.
Yeah. Awesome. So I feel like I could talk to you for a whole other hour, and there's like 3 topics that I think we're just going to have another episode on, right? So with our last maybe 5-ish minutes, what would you like to cover? Would you like to share more about your current business? I know I don't think we really have enough time to even dive into FODMAPs. I want to make your experience with FODMAPs like a whole other episode. What is, if you take a moment to kind of look inside, what bubbles up to the top as, wow, I really want to share this?
You did this to me the other day too. Good. You're making me think, but feel in the moment as to what
Take your time. Yeah.
You know what? It's the same thing that came up the other day, and I believe we have touched on it though, but I want to just highlight it.
Perfect.
Is that there are so many different solutions out there. There's so many different, there's so many pieces to this puzzle that we are working on to be a better self. And there's always going to be more, because if we stop learning, we stop growing and we stop being. That being said, though, when if you have gotten to that point in that journey where you feel really stuck, or you're feeling like you can't break through something, or you're failing at something, when you see or you think that others in a coaching program that you're doing, or others that are going to therapists are working through and growing and doing different things, or whatever piece of that puzzle you are working at, others are kicking butt in their sleep, and you can't fall asleep, just like, and you wake up middle of sleep and you're like, what the heck are they doing and I'm not? If you have already worked on the tools for sleep and have like really worked with a professional that you trust, that you believe these should work, the odds are it's a protector. And that's where I would dive in next, is to see if it is a protector. If that is a protector that is stopping you from being able to implement something that you know will be good for you, because protectors will do that. As we said,
Mhm.
called state mind, that they're protecting you from something from their viewpoint, their mind, their intellectual capability of wherever they kicked in. So going and diving into these protectors and working through those may be that next piece that you need to start unlocking the ability to then start implementing some more of those tools that you've already gathered, all of that learning you've already gained in.
Mhm.
May also show you as well that some of those tools that you have picked up might not even be for you, and that's okay, because you don't have to be like everybody else. And it may help you actually find the direction that is going to be the best one for you. So just, you're not
Yeah. You're not, I think I cut your audio off. You're not what?
you're not a failure.
Bravo. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not a failure. There is not anything wrong with you. These are just signs that your body is giving you that there's another piece of the puzzle for you to figure out. And if you
Yeah.
haven't done IFS yet, you might want to do that one as your next piece of the puzzle, because it will be eye-opening what direction that will lead you in.
Yeah. Let's say someone is listening to this and really kind of leaning in. Um, how how might they know, oh, okay, yeah, maybe this is a part. Just having parts isn't a problem. What might you say to that person?
So it is okay to protect us. So I kind of use this analogy with you the other day, but we can use it in a different context. So people always think that they should always be calm, in Zen, happy, in that state. But if you always are, then you're never taxing your body, you're never pushing it, your muscles, your bones, everything can't get stronger, and your body actually starts weakening. So it's kind of like if you're riding a horse, you have those reins, and you're sometimes pulling the reins tight and you're sometimes loosening them. It's this balance between back and forth.
Mhm.
So it is okay to have protectors. There are bad things out in this world. There are things that you do need protecting from. The key is, if you're spending a lot of your time, or you're finding that those protectors are affecting so many of your relationships or affecting so many things in your life, and they're kicking in maybe too hard, too strong, too much, and you're not able to get into self as well. It's that blend of going back and forth. And there are times where my certain protectors will kick in and I'm like, ooh, why is that kicking in? I'm like, because I was feeling this when this happened in this person. Okay. Next time, maybe I can react a little differently in my words or my choice,
Mhm.
but I'm still protecting myself and setting certain boundaries with that person. I still don't have to let that person in, but I can,
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
more caring way than I did do it. So there's ways to just find that balance, to be in and out of that protection and the self, because we'll always need to have some protection in our life, just not
Definitely.
not ruling our life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like that rigid boundary versus no boundary at all, right? Just flowing, no protection. you're definitely vulnerable.
Think of that too from a neurodiverse child, right? Like,
Mhm.
honestly, giving them that self and that ability to be themselves, and also the protection to know that they that hiding it a little bit, depending on not hiding their true selves, but like not going on and on about science in front of people that aren't interested in
Mm.
science, not like even though that's all they want to talk about or whatever, right? Like, so teaching them certain things of, you know what, this might not be the time to dive into all about you, or this might be a time to protect yourself, or even situations with like, I believe like the schooling system.
Mm.
There are things where, well, there's certain things in this world or this life that aren't necessarily designed for a neurodivergent child, and to teach them protective ways to handle the stimulations and handle the different things is okay for them to have.
Is okay. Yeah. I can see fairness being somewhere that me could use a lot of that type of work in, right? Like, no, that's not fair.
Yeah.
That's not right. Why would I allow it? Right. Yeah. And let's say it's in the school system. Yeah. Yeah. That's the first thing that came up. Sorry. I'm a little distracted.
Yeah. No, it's all good. I mean, there's so many things we can dive into with this. It's so fascinating, but you do need some of those protectors because not everybody in your environment is going to be in self when they're approaching you, and you need protectors to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's I'm gonna leave it right there because that is a
Mm.
uh great point. This was so great. I absolutely want to have you back. And some of the things that when you come back, I'd like to talk about are your first responder experience, the FODMAPs, and we didn't dive into this fascinating topic of sleep that you have so much experience with. So I think those three things could easily be in our future whenever you're available. Um, in case anyone is interested in working with you or just reaching out to ask you questions, how would you like them? How would you like them to contact you or get to know more about you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is Andi Clark. So Andi with an I, ANDICLARK.com. You can go there. All of my information should be there. And yeah, absolutely connect with me.
Awesome. Awesome. So I also want your permission. Can I just like upload this and maybe even with the video? Because we're nice and raw and we're not really wasting any time. Let's just share it, right?
Totally good for that. Yeah, I know. That's how I do. I'm so on board with that. Share it, get it. Absolutely. I believe, honestly, the more raw, the better. People feel it. It's all good. Mhm.
Totally. Totally. Well, Andi, thank you so very much. And for anyone that is listening either in 2024 January, or hey, maybe you're catching us in a year or two and going back to episode number 1. Thank you so much for listening. And just to let everybody out there know, each and every one of us are navigating something challenging in this very moment, and we absolutely don't have to go through it alone. So check out the next episode of Confessions from the Messy Middle and consider sharing your story. You're important and nothing is too small or too out there for us to be talking about. So what's important is that we connect with each other. So Andi, thank you again, and cheers from our messy middle.
Thank you.
Thanks. I feel like, oh my gosh, am I supposed to end? Can we say hello? Oh, I'm frozen.
You are frozen right now.
Oh, how funny. How long have I been frozen? I was covering my camera.
4 minutes,
That's
maybe.
hilarious.
Good.
I look so pensive though.
Stop the recording.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Where the heck is it?